Change your mind, change your money, change your life. I am Coach Rob Lee Simmons, the host of this podcast, and let me be your tour guide to greatness. Welcome. If I was doing any better, I would be you. Welcome to the Greatness Academy podcast. I have with me Dimyas Perdue. He is, above all else, he is probably one of the future top public speakers that we'll ever see. All of his work is dynamic, 22 years of service. I wanted to definitely highlight just the biggest part of what he does is leadership. And I'm just excited to have you on, my man. What's going on?
Man, what's going on? This is long overdue. Long overdue.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I just got to say, I appreciate you having me. I'm not the most interesting person in the room. You know what I mean? I got the pleasure to be able to look at this guy right now on the other side of my screen. So just thank you again for the opportunity, man. I've been thinking about this ever since we first met, thinking about what this would be like to get together, to be able to share a space. And we knew this time was going to come. I'm happy that it's here, man. And more than us being here, I'm happy for the listening ears.
Oh, yeah.
That will be able to get something from it. And I actually, let me remove that plural. I'm excited for the listening ear because I'm always talking about the one person that I really want to impact. So for whoever you are, Mr. or ma'am, whoever you are, I'm excited for what you get from this and with how you choose to transform your life with whatever comes out of this session. So I'm excited, man. Thank you again.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. Hey, just give us a brief synopsis of who Dimyas Perdue is and how you grew up.
Yeah, man. A lot of people look at who Dimyas is right now, and they automatically equate that with a lifetime of success. And that's not who I am, right? I'm a product of everything, tragedy to triumph, failures and progress, right? I'm a product of all of that, so born and raised in the home of the civil rights movement, Montgomery, Alabama, born to a single mother, raised by a grandmother who participated in the civil rights movement, who still, thank God, still with us today. So I'm raised by some strong women. Grew up, I was a young athlete, was very big on football, and football was great for me, man, because it was I love the thought of team. I've always been a team type person, and I loved sports. I always had a competitive nature. Football was great for me. But then when we lost, I would feel like I did my part. You know what I mean? We didn't lose because of me. And, call it selfish thinking. But the reality is that's how I felt, man. I was like, I did my part. So I got into wrestling. And wrestling was awesome for me because what that did for me is it let me know that what I didn't like in football, I couldn't point the finger to anybody else in wrestling. Because if I won, it was because of me. If I lost, it was because of me. And so there was a level of discipline that I got from wrestling, whether it was through practice, whether it was in a tournament or a one-on-one match, just, a regular situation, man. It taught me so much about me. And that was a great part of my upbringing. So I started that in the 7th grade, man, did it up and through high school and graduated high school in 2000. I graduated at 17 and I joined the Marine Corps. But prior to that amazing transformation happening, there were some other behaviors that happened between 13 and 17 that led me towards the Marine Corps. Everybody has an origin story. And that origin story, as I mentioned earlier, from tragedy to triumph, but a lot of failures and some progress, I stifled my own progress at 13 years old because I chose to follow what the neighborhood was doing. And I chose to get, jumped into a gang. And that led me to doing some things that this podcast is not about. But the short of it is, man, my senior year, I was expelled from high school. I couldn't go to any public high school in the state of Alabama and got into some issues, man, wasn't doing well at home, and then decided I was a big dog and I was going to leave the house. So I'm squatting in somebody's basement, roaches everywhere, and I'm like, yeah, I ain't as much of a thug as I thought I was. You know what I mean? I might want to go back and say, yes, ma'am. But what ended up happening, man, is I'm very grateful for the recruiter finding me again. We had already made contact before. I will always give him a shot whenever I have the opportunity. Young Sergeant Michael Hakes Jr. I haven't talked to him since then, man, but this guy picked me up every day to go to private school, picked me up in the morning every day, took me to private school. When private school was done, took me back to his office, took me back to night classes, and then took me back to that that basement where I was squatting. He did that for 6 months, man. He did that for 6 months. And when I got my high school diploma, I never walked across the stage. I finished my last test one night, got a diploma, handed it to him. He took it to my mom, handed it to my mom. I got on the bus, went to Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island. 22 years later, I'm a retired Marine.
Oh, that's amazing. Hey, so
Yeah.
Montgomery, Alabama, man, let's talk about it. So my father's from Montgomery, passed away, but he always told me the tales of the South. Keeping it light here. Are we talking War Eagle or are we talking Roll Tide?
Man, listen, there's only one Tide, man. There's nothing else to talk about, There is
Roll
nothing
Tide,
else to
roll.
talk about. You know what I mean? And if anybody is listening to this and they don't believe about the rolling tide, you can log off now because we don't need that negativity in our lives. Yeah, man, we're die hard roll tide. My family is split in half, but the half that matters, we bleed crimson. So
I love it. I love it. So growing up in Alabama, what has that meant to you in your life where you are now? What are some of the things that were instilled in you during that time of being down there?
yeah, man, it's country living. Country living, a slower lifestyle. I'm not from the country, right? I don't have chickens in the backyard. Although I want chickens in my backyard now. I don't come from that level of country, but I come from that. It's slower. It's slower in Alabama. It's not the fast pace of New York. My bride is from New York. I go there and I break out in hives. I'm like, people are too rude. It's a little bit of, they talk a little bit slower. The vowels are extended. Hey, y'all, can I get a pen? Everything has got the extended vowels in there, man. But what I love about being from the South is we're humans. I feel like we're humans. There, of course, you got your chaos everywhere, but there's a reason why it's called Southern hospitality. I've taken that hospitable nature and I made that a part of who I was as a human being. And everything I did, whether it was education and dealing with people, whether it was, my time as a leader in the Marine Corps, my time being deployed and in combat, the way I parent, Alabama shaped me. It shaped me to be it definitely shaped me to be firm, right? It shaped me to be firm because that's the household I grew up in. But it also shaped me to be fair because I saw what inequity looked like. I saw what it looked like in my family. And I never wanted to be able to bring that same mindset to any organization. Knowing what my grandmother went through, I saw what inequity did to her and how her mindset stayed the same for so long. And when I realized when people are stuck in that mindset, it stifles you, and it doesn't just stifle you, that bleeds over into everybody else who respects you, everybody else who looks to you as a North Star, everybody that looks to you as a lighthouse. And so what it did for me is it let me know this type of individual I need to be because I want to be able to make generations of what right looks like and not what wrong looks like, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's touch point just a little bit on the 22 years Marine Corps. A lot of leadership has happened during that time. Just give me a little bit about, there's 100 questions I want to ask.
Yeah. Well, come on,
Ask.
man. We got time.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your career. How was the ladders of leadership built over your 22 years?
I think the greatest thing that I think helped me out, man, and I won't get on the EQ piece, but right now, because I know we're going to go there, but I think the greatest thing that helped me out was my ability to adapt at a very young age and my desire to be different. My ability to adapt and my desire to be different. Like I always I never got my ears pierced, even though everybody in the neighborhood did it. I'm 41 years old, made it through my entire Marine Corps career. I don't have any tattoos. You know what I mean? I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't curse. That's my thing. But I've always wanted to be different. And that different thing is what I feel always made me stand out. Because when I was in a sea of sameness, when I was swimming in the sea of sameness, I was able to stand out amongst the masses. And that easily put me in positions where I was able to adapt a lot faster than everyone else because I was vigilant. I was able to see the changing of the tide. I was able to see when I should stand when people were sitting. I was able to see when I should run faster when people were slowing down. So it became easy for me because I always stood out, And so meritoriously promoted, a few times meritoriously promoted coming out of boot camp, a bunch of Marine Corps boards starting out, came in as communication. You can talk about us, but you can't talk without us. So I came in as communication, man, and ended up doing my first combat deployment, as a comm Marine with 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, Battle of Anazaria. And that was one of the things, not even one of the things, that was the first thing that truly shaped me as a leader. Because when you experience that level of adversity, when you, at such a young age, I always say that adversity doesn't build character, it reveals character, right? Well, although it does build it for sure, but it doesn't build character first. And that's where a lot of people mess it up. They think when you go through something tough, that character is built automatically. That's not factual. Your character is revealed first. And based on what you do with that revelation, that determines what you're able to build from there. And I want to make sure I get that out there. So through these things that I went through in combat and dealing with everything that comes with being a Marine while we're there, you know what I mean? Like it was chaos. You know, we lost a lot of people in a short period of time. And so I suffered a lot after that, with, you know, struggled with PTSD for a long time. And I would be lying to you to say that every day is sunshine and rainbows. But through this adversity, I realized a lot of things. One, I realized there are not enough resources out there for people, so I need to be a resource for people. And this is one thing that helped me in that level of leadership. So that's why I chose my education path. So because I was dealing with PTSD, I was like, I need to get educated. So I went and got an associate's, then I went and got a bachelor's in psychology with the focus in military resilience. Why? Because I was dealing with things and I knew no one was there to help me out. And even when I got the assistant, I'm like, I'm just another number for you. But I knew my Marines had the BLT factor with me, not the sandwich, right? But the believe you, like you, trust you factor. I knew they had that with me. And I knew they could trust me. And I knew they believed in me. And by me being so vulnerable, this is a major leadership thing. I didn't just wear my heart on my sleeve so people had to look at it. I spoke with my heart. And that opened the doors for them to say, you know what? Corporal Perdue, Staff Sergeant Perdue, Gunnery Sergeant Perdue, First Sergeant Perdue, can I talk with you? They knew when I said yes, they knew they had somebody. So I got that education, you know? And so that was a major rung in my ladder. A major rung in the ladder was for me to get in that education, to be able to say that if you want to better the organization, if you want to better people, don't just depend on current knowledge that's out there. Go and seek something from somewhere else. And I did that. And that led me to go and, because of all the life struggles that I went through, I got my master's in human services counseling, crisis response, and trauma. Because here's the thing. We know so many people that go through things. There's going to be somebody who's listening to this podcast or any of your other podcasts who are currently in a crisis and have no idea what to do. So I said, you know what, being that I know that people are either going through a storm, coming out of a storm, you know what I mean? Or going into a storm, coming out of one, you know what I mean? It's just three phases, right? You're either looking at it, you're in it, or you're coming out of it. And knowing that people are there, I wanted to make sure I was the person that they can lean on for guidance. And so again, that's where I went to that education. So whether the education is in traditional school or whether it's in your experience from where you are, that was a major thing that I felt helped me from a leadership standpoint. And the other thing that helped me out, man, was failing. I failed a few times. I failed a few times, but those failures are the things that put me on a path where I never knew I would be. For example, when I went to communication school, you know, passed, and I got the opportunity to go to the next level up. And I didn't sign up for that next level up, but I'm like, all right, cool. You want me to go to another school? I'll go to another school. I went to that school, played around, and failed out. But by failing out of that school, I ended up getting sent to 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, deploying and going to combat with them, receiving an award from Valor in Combat, and that changed the trajectory of my career. But had I passed that school, I never would have experienced combat like that because of the job. I never would have experienced it. I never would have learned how to be a radio operator. I never would have learned how to call for air support. I never would have known how to do the tactical things that we needed to do to dress wounds if somebody was wounded. So that failure was the best thing that happened for my career because I never would have been able to experience the things I experienced. And I wonder if I would have passed that school, would my education be what it was? Because again, after combat, years later, I'm not talking, it wasn't right away, but I go to school for psychology with a focus in military resilience. And so when we talk about the different levels of leadership, the first one was getting the education. There was an education wrong on that ladder. And then it became the failure wrong and understanding that this is not fatal in the book, right? This is not fatal. This is something that was critical for me to be successful. Like I need that. That acronym, FAIL, this was my first attempt in learning. And if I truly want to apply, that means I need to accept failure. And people say fail and fail often. And that's what I did. I also failed in the way I led. I learned this is not the way you're supposed to be. I thought when I got promoted to sergeant that I could yell at everybody.
Yeah.
Didn't work out well for me.
Yeah, learn the hard way.
I learned the hard way, man. So just those would be the first two things that I would say, man, is get educated from your job and what you were doing. That really helped me out. Getting educated by people who are smarter than me, who put it in books, especially when the military is paying for it, make sure you get that. And then failure was one of the greatest teaching tools that I had. But people fear failure because they fear what other people would say about them failing. I never cared about anybody else's impression of me. I cared about how I viewed myself. And I knew if I failed, I didn't just figure out what didn't work. I figured out what I have inside of me. So fail often, get your education is one of the best things you can do.
Oh man, absolutely. And me still being in the machine of what we know as the military, I understand that leadership brings its own dynamics, right? Now you
Yeah.
transition out of the military and now you take these regular individuals and you turn them into like visionary leaders. What are some of your core principles in leadership?
Oh man. One of the first ones that I love, and I mentioned it in the book, I talk about what leaders need to do is one, they need to conquer what I call the deadly C's.
Mm.
And the deadly C's is a word play. And it's deadly letter C's. And those letters are comfort and complacency. Many leaders find themselves very comfortable in their positions and they're reluctant to change. They're reluctant to change because it's easy doing what they're doing and they're comfortable and they get complacent. And you miss things when you're complacent. You miss things. You know what we say in the military, complacency kills.
Oh yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And so you get super comfortable. So the first thing I always tell people, no matter where they are, whether this is in the military, and I even coach corporate level clients who are operating in these spaces, I ask them, where are you in relationship with comfort and complacency? How does it feel in your job? And the answer many times is I'm very comfortable. And you know what? I have become complacent. And I will tell them that I see this because I always do things based on an assessment. And when I look at the data, they think they're doing well. But when you do that 360 assessment, when you do a 360 assessment and you tell yourself, I feel like I'm doing this well. I feel like I show up for my team. But then your team does that evaluation and they say, no, he actually just sits in the office. Lincoln has a way that he talked about it in his book, Lincoln on Leadership. He says, get out of your ivory tower. Too many leaders make it to the position of authority and they sit back. Oh man, look at this seat. Oh yeah. Look at this rank. Oh, if I got my pass right here,
Yeah.
look at this. Looks good. Let me go outside and do this. And so you get so far away from the action. You get so far away from the people that you swore to lead. You get so far away from the battle. You get so far away from those intimate conversations that you get comfortable and you get complacent. And so that's the first thing that I coach people. The other thing, again, I'm always going to give you things from the book because I didn't write it just for it to sit there. I wrote it for the people who may never read it, and I'm giving them a glimpse of what it is. The other thing is what I call E squared. Ego and emotion. These are the greatest predictor of failure for me. If you cannot manage your ego and you cannot manage your emotions, these are the things that not only affect your professional relationships, but these are the things that drastically impact your personal relationships. And so people have a hard time shedding the ego because of, again, what's on their collar, their position in their title that's on the door, how many letters are after your name, how many degrees you have, what your bank account looks like. People ride on those things. And that becomes the ego. And that ego, if you show up with, that's not authentic. Because when somebody tells you that they don't care about your status, then you get emotional. And when you don't know how to manage your emotions effectively, if someone says, I don't care about you being Dr. whoever, or I don't care about you being Sergeant Major so-and-so, I don't care if you're the CEO of this procedure is not right based on manual, this section 1 tac 34, you are incorrect. And now the emotions get in the way. And when you don't know how to properly manage your emotions, this is when you go away from being professional as you should be, and you make it personal. And once you've done that, those lines have been crossed. And what I always tell people, you have to have that believe you like you trust factor, but mainly that T. Trust is gained in drops, but it's lost in buckets. And leaders lose it in buckets very fast. When you tell someone that you are going to do something and you do not do it, or if you tell them you're going to take care of them and you do not take care of them, or if you tell them this is fact and they find out it was opinion, you lose the trust in buckets and you will gain it back in drops.
That's tough. That's tough. Let me ask you this though. So in the book, you talk about, reevaluating the people around you. Look at the 5 closest people to you, and that can just kind of give you an idea of, are you pouring into these people, or, are they just sucking you dry, right? What's that look like for your life? Who are those top 5 people? Where are they taking you?
Oh man. Oh man. I used to say I had a big circle because I did used to have a big circle. But now I have looking at it on paper, it looks like a decimal point. You got to get a magnifying glass to see who's actually in my circle because it's diminished so much because I realized how many people were showing up to our relationship, the relationship with me and them with an empty plate, saying that I know you can give me something. Let me, I really like that, Dimyas. Oh, that's good. That's good. Oh, let me get that. You gonna eat that too? I realized how many people were showing up to this dinner table, how many people were showing up to our communion where we're supposed to be eating together. And I pour and I give. And then I realized, okay, so now it's my time. You said, oh, you know what? Hey, why don't we revisit this? Because I got that other meeting. And so I realized, when I went through some very hard times in my life, and I share this because every time I share my story, they live on. I lost my twin boys January 2020 at 8 and 16 days old. We lost, my bride and I, so when the world was going through coronavirus, we were going through the birth of twin boys that we were thrilled to have in this world. And then 8 days later, we lose him. We lost our son who is doing the best. We lost our son, Royal. And as we're making funeral arrangements, we're at the funeral home, we get a call from the hospital saying, you need to get here now. And we got there in enough time to see my second son before he passed away. And what I expected to get, Roman and Royal, I always say their names, what I expected to get from the organization I gave so much to, what I expected to get from the people who I poured into day in and day out, what I expected was a phone call in my absence saying, how are you? What I expected was someone to reach out to my bride and say, how are you? Is there anything we can do? Can we get a meal for you? Can we check in? But nobody did that. They assumed because of my posture. They assumed because I'm always the one smiling and giving that everything was all right. But you know it. The toughest people are the ones who are the most broken on the inside. And during this time, it was so heavy for us that I once again realized that I really need to back away from giving so much because now I have nothing to give. And I need someone to pour into me, and these people know what's going on. And I'm not just pointing at the organization I was a part of for 22 years. I'm pointing at everybody who knew me. But then I said, this is about you, though. This is about you, you know what I mean? And I had to get out of my feelings, but that's one thing that really changed me, man, and made me start to diminish my circle because I only wanted people in my life who were going to be there for me through good times and through bad times. And the people who were in that large circle for me, they showed me that this was more about what they can get. I talk about relationships. I talk about ships in general. We're all navigating some ship in life. You've got friendships, you've got partnerships, you've got so many different ships. But the most important one for me was relationship. Right? That was the most important thing for me. With a relationship, we have a needs model. My needs, your needs, and what's required. At that point in time, I had needs. And when those needs weren't met, conflict arose. It was a conflict between me and them. And it was a conflict in my heart, man. And so I said, I really have to take care of me. But to come back and bring it to where my relationship is now, who are in my 5, after I've given that out there, my bride is one of them. My bride is one of them. People talk about what their outside circle looks like, but let me tell you something. What she's done for me and taking care of me mentally, taking care of me emotionally, and dealing with all of the things that go on in this brain of mine. I took an assessment recently and it said I'm a mad scientist. So for somebody to be able to deal with all of that, man, and give me the structure that I need and push me, she pushed me like nobody else, and I mentioned her in the book many times because she was the one that says, you've been talking about writing this book for a while. I've booked you a cabin. And if you come back from this cabin stay, I'm booking you 5 days, and then there'll be another 5 sessions of 2 days apiece, a total of 10 days. Don't call us. Go and write. And if you come back from this cabin and the book is not complete, you never wanted to write a book. You were more in love with the idea of writing a book. Come on, man. How can somebody who speaks to you like that not be in your circle? So my bride is in my circle, man. And of course, I have the honor of being able to work with the legendary, the #1 motivational speaker in the world, Dr. Eric Thomas. I have the honor of being able to coach alongside him with some top level leaders. And that circle alone has sent me to the next level. You can't Google Eric Thomas and watch a YouTube video without wanting to conquer everything in your world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that circle is definitely there, man. And then I have some great leaders who were with me through the storm, who I keep there, and they push me from a business standpoint. They push me from an education standpoint, and they're the reason why, they know I'm the guy. They're the reason why I'm in the PhD program right now. They're the reason why I'm the father I am, because they constantly check in. They constantly send the messages every morning. What are your priorities for the day? And at the end of the day, did you accomplish those priorities? What were the distractions that kept you from doing it? Why did you not allow yourself to be married to those goals? And what did you marry instead? Those are the people who are in my circle, and they're helping take me to the next level.
And that's super dope, man. Let's kind of transition into, and because I feel like you not only are a great motivational speaker, but the way you deliver the message is just like a story build up. And then you always end on the highest note. So I want to really see where this goes. So we talk a little bit about
No pressure.
yeah, no pressure. We talk a little bit about the elephant tied to the banyan tree, and he's trying to get away, and he's burning out all of his energy, and then kind of related to, how kind of life beats us up, and then we get physically trained to not be able to get to where we need to be. Like, what would be some of the things that you teach to help people escape that banyan tree?
Yeah. So to provide a little bit more context for the people who may not understand the banyan tree, the short version of it is that young elephants are tied to a tree, and every time they try to pull away, they're met with resistance. And eventually they get to the point where they no longer want to move, and their trainers can then tie them to the smallest thing. And the minute they feel the resistance, they don't want to go again. And they failed many times before. And now that failure, once they feel it, it's a reminder of what they've gone through. And then it's pointless to try. And so what is some of the coaching that I have for people that do that? The reality is, what happens with people when they fail, when they're met with that resistance, when it didn't work out for the fourth time and they decide they don't want to do it again, it becomes a psychological barrier. It becomes a psychological chain. And although there is nothing, it becomes, I also talk about the perimeter collar. It's like the dogs with the perimeter collar, right? They're only going to go so far because they know, if I go here, I will be shocked. If I go here, I will be told you can't do this again. If I go here, I'll be met with opposition. And we get so comfortable staying in this box. We get so complacent because the thought of being shocked again, the thought of failing again becomes so much of a turn that I'm willing to just stay back. And I don't want to go through that same thing again. And one of the best things I tell people to do comes from a self-management strategy and EQ. The best thing I can tell people is you have to manage your self-talk, because your self-talk is the thing that will get you to go over any mountain, or it's the thing that will make you sit in a corner with your arms folded saying, I just can't do it again. I can't afford to miss this. I can't afford to make this mistake again. I can't afford to take this business leap again. Come on, you know about business. I can't afford to make this financial risk. I know I really want to get my credit, but I need this money for something else. So I want to do this. And so there's so many things, whether it's a relationship with somebody that you're trying to get, starting a business, education, joining the military, departing from the military. There's so many different things that become a psychological chain, become your perimeter collar. But the only thing you have to do is change your self-talk, go back to the 1980s engine that could, I think I can, right? And then do it. But understand that you won't be able to get it right every time. One other thing that becomes our psychological barrier, our chain, our perimeter collar, is the idea of perfection. We want to be able to do things right the first time, but that's not factual. That's not real. What I love about the Marine Corps Staff and CO Creed, it says, although perfection lies beyond the grasp of any mortal hand, I shall yet strive to attain perfection, that I may ever be aware of my needs and capabilities to improve myself. If we stop chasing perfection and we start looking at these situations as practice, each time we practice it, you create a new neural pathway in your brain. Every time you do it, that pathway becomes stronger. That myelin sheath becomes stronger. And now it becomes like riding a bike. I'm willing to get on a bike. When is the last time you rode a bike?
It's been a minute. but I know I can hop back on the ride again.
But you know you can hop back on again because you've already broken through those barriers of failure. You've already broken through the psychological barriers. You don't need the training wheels anymore. But that same concept has to apply when we're dealing with new situations, when we're dealing with things where we failed before. You have to be willing to go through the shock. You have to be willing to understand that this is not real. There are real barriers that are in place, and there are barriers that we have created to be for self-preservation. There are barriers we've created in our minds to be able to protect us emotionally, right? But many of those barriers are designed to keep us in place. We are designed for safety. That's what our emotions do. Our emotions tell us that there's something we need to pay attention to. And the first thing we want to do is we want to maintain that safety. And when we talk about something such as breaking through a psychological barrier, safety is the root of what it really is. And the best thing you can do is change that self-talk to be able to help you make it through those challenges.
Man, I can only imagine you and Dr. E.T. and your group having y'all Toastmaster.
Oh,
you know, that's what that looks like.
Every morning at 6 a.m. to 7 a.m, I'm with the legend.
Yeah.
I'm with the legend, you know what I mean? And we get to, and you know, we had the opportunity to work together, man, and it's just phenomenal being able to learn and to be able to share. And I'll tell you, one of the most humble people you will meet will openly tell you, that was good. I'm going to take that. Send me that quote. That was really good. I'm going to apply that. I've never thought about it that way. This is the GOAT. And when you see that level of humility and it's in the room, man, you want to talk about, it's not a tennis match with us back and forth. We're on the same side of the net and we're serving. You know what I mean? And
I know, man.
Yeah.
You know, this show ain't about him, but I'm from Detroit as well. So in reading his books, I vision everywhere he's been, and I've been there. It's the dynamic of, really where he started, I mean, even where you started. Do you think that the things that you all have overcome makes you more, I don't want to use the word because I can't find the word that I need, but more presentable to people who look like me because we can tell the same story?
I would be lying to you if I said no. Because the reality is there are people, our culture does not come from a place of security.
Mm-hmm.
Our culture doesn't come from that. And so when you show up and the first thing you present, let me tell you something. I love a good pair of sweatpants and I love a good suit. I mean, look at the book cover, right?
Yeah.
I love a good suit. I chose to show up on my book cover in a suit and not the sweatpants, even though I love my Purdue Leadership Institute fitted, but that's not on the cover of the book. But I tell these stories to make sure that they understand that I've been where you are. Mm-hmm. Whenever I sat down and spoke with a counselor to talk about the PTSD, if they couldn't speak to me about where I've been, I was immediately shut off. Because I felt like you couldn't understand where I was going or where I came from. And so when I go places and I tell them, hey, here's where I grew up, I watch the standoffish 25-year-old lean in and then say, are there any questions? But he wanted nothing to do with me when that tie was up here. He wanted nothing to do until he got that I trust this guy factor. And so it's so important for you to be not ashamed of your story, because that story was part of what created you, what allowed you to get here. When I go and speak places, they're like, how did you write that? Man, how did you come up with that speech? That was so good. How long did it take you to write it? Man, that seemed like that would take me 2 weeks to write. I was like, that's the problem in your thinking. It took me 41 years to write this speech.
That's good.
It took me 41 years to get to this point. You're thinking this was a weekend sitting down without distractions. No, dog, part of where I came from, every failure I talked about, these stories and the way I'm able to put it together is because I lived this. And I needed to be able to tell you this story this way so you could understand. I shared the story of my brothers. My oldest brother, you know what I mean, not born of my mom. My oldest brother died in prison, 2 counts of capital murder. He was doing a life sentence. And my baby brother, born of my mother, he's doing 20 years, man. And I tell this story about the one that got away. I tell this story because my brother, every day I get the phone call, you have a collect call from. But when I'm talking to these young guys, I'm like, no, I've never been locked up. I never had to stay. Let's get for the record, right?
I'm with you. I'm with you.
For the record, but I share our story because I needed to be able to resonate with them. I needed to be able to resonate with them. And it's not just saying I'm from the hood. That's not what this is about. I just want you to see that the product that you are looking at today, you can have your own version of this. Should you take the worst and the best of your circumstances and make it work for you and not against you?
It's tough. That's tough, man. Every time we leave up here, man, damn, that was thoughtful. Let's get into EQ, man. So let's talk a little bit about emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
You know, it being a cornerstone of your leadership. When did you recognize that it was important? And then, let me ask that question. When did you recognize it was important for people to have some level of emotional intelligence?
2014, I was teaching at a leadership academy in Hawaii. I was a staff and COIC of the Corps, staff non-commissioned officer in charge of sergeant school. And it was almost the anniversary of our attacks from the Battle of Nasiriyah. So we're coming up on the 11-year reunion of it. And I'm in a really low place at this point. And if anybody knows how the brain works, with trauma, it really is a real thing. It's cyclical, you know what I mean? It comes back around. But there are steps you can do to be able to work and combat it. But at this point in time, I didn't have that understanding. And I got a message from someone asking me, how did my son's father die? They knew, but at this point now, they wanted the son to know the story and ask me would I share it. And to recall this stuff, man, it was just, I never thought I would have to share this. And I was so broken that I called my mom and I gave her the story for the first time. Keep in mind, this happened in 2003. And when I shared the story with her, what happened to me in 2011, so many years later, she said, I never knew, son. She said, my focus was on everybody else. You always just seemed so happy. I just never knew you went through this. And then I pulled my citation and I read the citation to her saying what they awarded me for, what they said I did. And I broke down, man. I broke down like the worst I'd ever broken down before. And I'm scared. I'm worried about you. She says, I know you're okay right now, even though you're not okay. She says, I just don't want you to be that 60-year-old man that goes postal. That's what she said. I don't want you to be a 60-something-year-old man and go postal. She said, I want you to get help. So the next day I showed up to PT the Marines and I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And I got there and we had the bracelets, right? The memorial bracelets. And I took the bracelet off and I passed it around and I said, I want you all to read what that says. And I had the Marines names on there, not their names. I had the battle, 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, 18 killed in action, Battle of Mount. That was March 23rd, 2003. And I had them read that. And for the first time in front of people, I said, I'm broken. For the first time in front of Marines, I said, I'm broken. And when I said those words, I began to cry right there in the middle of the PT field, right there in front of them. And I picked up the phone and I called behavioral health. And when I did that, what that did for the people in front of me meant the world, because now they saw a person who was a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps, PT standing in front of them, calling behavioral health, saying, I need help. And so when I started to go through the training, the counseling, that was my first time being introduced to emotional intelligence. The specific portion that they talked about was self-awareness and self-management. I needed to be fully aware of the things that were happening in my mind, because without that awareness, how do you manage it effectively? Many times people become aware of their emotions after they've done something. And we always say hindsight is 20/20, but you never say hindsight is 20/20 after something good happened. It's always hindsight is 20/20 after something negative. And so that was my first introduction to it. And then years later, I'm working at Marine Corps University as a first sergeant, and I see an assessment. And this assessment, after studying and being in school, I see an assessment of someone, Sergeant Major, who was there, who brought me to Marine Corps University to make some changes and order to really be an ambassador for education, really be an ambassador for what right looks like. And I saw this assessment and I thought this was phenomenal. And I want to be able to bring this to the Marine Corps. And if I can make the Marine Corps a more emotionally intelligent organization and get rid of the negative stigma around emotional intelligence, we would be phenomenal. Because I always say we do a great job of fighting wars, but we do a terrible job of fighting the war within. And I said, here we go. We're going to do this. And so I reached out to this company And I told them, hey, I want to bring it to the Marine Corps. And they were like, tell me more about what you want to do. And I tell them, I said, but I'm retiring soon and I'm starting Purdue Leadership Institute. And they were like, tell me more about that. And I was like, well, it's based on leadership, resilience, and emotional intelligence. Tell me more. And that tell me more led to a conversation with the executive vice president of this company, which led to a conversation with all of the senior leadership on Valentine's Day of 2020, which led to them flying me to California and certifying me in their version of emotional intelligence. And then me doing the skill bridge with them. And then shortly into the skill bridge, them saying, we like you and we know that you are phenomenal and you're going to go and do great things. And literally she told me, she says, I want to get you before the rest of the world gets you. So we want to make you we want to offer you a position. I was like, what's the position? And it wasn't one. So they created a position. So thankful for them, man. They created a position for me. And now I have the luxury of being able to travel the nation, to be able to travel the world, teaching emotional intelligence as a director of military solutions to military and corporate America. So that's how I got to this point with EQ. And that's why I've been able to do this amazing job for the last 2 years, coupled with running my personal business. So it's been phenomenal.
And so most people say hurt people, but you have a story of hurt people, heal, then help people when they care. That's good. How can you educate others to use emotional intelligence? Yeah, I don't want to make it a loaded question.
No, phenomenal question. Let's go with the definition first. The ability, based on how it's defined, within this organization, the authors of the Emotional Intelligence 2.0 book, Drs. Travis Bradbury and Dr. Gene Greaves, they define it as the ability to recognize and understand emotions, and I say in yourself and others, and then the ability to use that awareness to improve your behavior and your actions, interactions with other people. Recognizing the emotion, understanding the emotion, and more importantly, managing this awareness. Because if you don't manage the emotion, that's not emotionally intelligent. That's low EQ, emotional quotient. The problem is there are a lot of people who have high awareness. There are a lot of leaders who have high awareness, but their ability to manage their awareness and manage the relationships is where people fail. They care more about getting it off their chest than communicating effectively. They care more about being heard than managing the relationship. And so we break down EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence, in the form of self-awareness and self-management. That's the personal competence. That's about me. And then social awareness and relationship management, that's about you. When we talk about social awareness, we talk about it from the standpoint of an iceberg. I know you, I know the guy on the other side of the camera, but that's the tip of the iceberg. That's the 10% that I can see. And if you know anything about an iceberg, the greater majority of the iceberg is below the surface. But the problem is leaders, teachers, people in relationships make 100% of their decisions based on the 10% they can see. And they're not willing to ask the questions about the 90%, the bulk of what's happening to a person. They would rather come in and somebody say, hey, how you doing today? It's all this, he must be having a freaking bad day. But we don't care enough to find out what's below the surface. But the things that are below the surface directly affect the way I perform. We don't care. The problem is, man, what I see is people do not care about the greatest asset to the organization, and that's the human being, human capital. We don't invest in human capital. We invest in machinery. We invest in the greatest weapons. We invest in the new technology. We invest more in AI. But none of those things matter without the human factors with those people. And relationship management being the other portion of the social competence is my needs. I know what I need as a leader, but I should also care about your needs. But the thing is, managing relationships is not I meet my needs and you meet your needs. No, it's a relationship. So I meet my needs and I also meet your needs and I meet what's required for us to work. And in turn, you have to do the same thing. That's effective relationship management. But if all I care about is the personal competence, then it's self-awareness and self-management. And I don't care about managing that with you. So when I talk to leaders, I tell them, understand where you are. But if you want to be effective, focus your efforts outward. Get out of the mirror and focus your efforts outwards in the social competence of emotional intelligence. And I guarantee you, you will be the number one word we talk about, and that's effective. Are you effective in your personal relationship? Are you effective in your professional? If you are, I guarantee you have a higher level of emotional intelligence. If you're not effective, it's time to take the assessment. It's time to start dialing it back so you can start to work on the things that'll make you better.
I love it. We still up here.
You're killing me with that, man.
I love it, man. Let me get my notebook out, man. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Amazon Prime and your goals in life. A lot of times people try to microwave success.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do we combat that as human beings? Because everybody wants that quick endorphin. How do we combat that?
Mhm. Nothing that comes fast ever lasts long. Nothing. Nothing. Think about every fast food restaurant. We go to a fast food restaurant, we bring that food home, we say we're gonna sit it on the counter, we go take a shower, you come back. Does it taste the same?
Nah, not at all.
Not fast food. Nothing that comes fast. I'm telling you, man. Like I've thought about everything that comes fast. And if it comes fast and you keep going fast, it can be dangerous. Look at NASCAR. Look at NASCAR. So what I tell people to do is we have to fall in love with two things. One, we have to appreciate the journey, and everybody wants to get on the ski lift and hurry up and get to the top of their mountain. But nobody wants to take the stairs. Nobody wants to take the stairs. We don't want to take the stairs because what's required. We don't want to take the stairs because we don't have the stamina to be able to deal with everything that's happening. In the book, I talk about the haiku stairs or the stairway to heaven that's in Hawaii. There were so many times people would say, I want to go and get on these stairs because I know the view is going to be spectacular from up there. And they get halfway up there and the wind starts to blow and they're like, oh my goodness, I can't do this. Or the rain starts to come and they're like, I'm being hit with way more than I expected. I thought we would be there by now. And so the reason why I encourage people to take the stairs in life is because when you take the stairs, there are certain checkpoints. I remember hiking Mount Fuji back in 2013 in Japan. And when I was hiking this, there were checkpoints along the way, mandatory stopping points. But here's the thing about the mountain that was crazy for me. And I never knew this because I never hiked a mountain this big, although I was an avid hiker. I thought I was just going to be able to get on this mountain and just keep going up. But that's not what it looked like. It was like this. I'm like, why am I going left and right to get up this mountain? This makes no sense. And there were checkpoints all along the way. But as I started to get higher, I started to realize I wasn't acclimatized. And man, did I start to feel some altitude sickness. I had a big pack and I started to realize the things that I had in my pack I didn't really need. But I wanted to hurry up and get there. And so what happens is people don't understand the value of taking the slow route to be able to get there because there are certain things that we need to learn along the way to sustain us when we get to the top. People that get promoted super fast in the military, they get there and they lack the experience that's necessary to be able to operate at that level. People who show up with higher levels of education in businesses, they get there. Yes, you have the education, but you don't have the skill set. And that's why you have these issues. And so I encourage people, one, to take the stairs. That's one thing. The other thing I tell people is pay attention to where you're going because I talk about the elevator, right? Being on the elevator before everybody has done this. We're on the elevator and guess what we're doing when we're on there? Elevator goes boom. And what do? We step off. We step off and then when we step off, we look left and we look right and we realize we're on the third floor and we were actually supposed to be going to the sixth floor. Yeah. So one thing that happens when people want to hurry up and get somewhere and they're not paying attention, they lose focus and they end up getting off before they're supposed to. But if you were taking the stairs, you have no choice but to go where you're going. You're not going to just walk out any door because you know you got a few flights to go. But sometimes that's where we really mess up, man. We get off because we're not paying attention. But what I love about the elevator when they come in and there are a bunch of people on it, they're pressing all of these floors, right? You're 12th floor. You want to get to 12, but you got somebody that came on, they're going to 3, they're going to 6, they're going to 8, they're going to 9. And now these are mandatory stops that you have to go to be able to get there. And I think that's what people need to be able to embrace. If you can look at your success journey as however many steps you want to call it 50. I want you to picture every single one of those lights illuminated. And I need you to appreciate when that door opens, what you will learn in this space. Be willing to get off and take everything in. Be willing to interact with those people who are going up with you because there are lessons to be learned at every stop. They may be getting off the relationships that you have. They may be getting off the businesses that you were in. They may be getting off all the people who lose their life and they're going to go with you, but they have something to give you on the way to floor 12, on the way to floor 50. But it's up to you to slow down that process, absorb everything in that moment to be able to make it everything that it can be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, we get going. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah, man. Oh, man. Woo. Man, I love it. I love it. Hey, I want to kind of start getting into Purdue leadership as to we kind of talked about the conception of PLI. But what about the maturation, right? What does that look like as far as company growth? What are some of the things that you're doing and what are some of the things that you're looking into getting into?
Yeah, man, I love that question because there is a lot of growth that I'm expecting. The first thing that we've done is I realize I'm only one human. And as much as I used to think I'm Superman, that cape really don't work. It's just a piece of cloth. And I want to live forever. I want to live forever. So what does maturation look like? What does longevity look like for PLI? It looks like preserving everything from a virtual stance to be able to live forever. That's first and foremost. That's my order of priority right now, because I want to be able to teach my great grandchildren. And I want them to be able to say, I know this is what he would have done because he told me. That's priority. Before I talk about helping any other human being, I care about the Perdue legacy. I care about that legacy. The reason why I make content, the reason why I post the videos is not for anybody to like it. It's because the generations of Perdue that come after that want to know who Dimyas Perdue is, when they type my name in Google, when they go to Instagram, when they go to YouTube, I want them to see their great grandfather and the fact that he was only putting out positivity in the world because he wanted to be the change that everybody needed to see. So that's the first thing for Perdue Leadership Institute. Now, business side, PLI. What's happening is I also want to be able to do that because I'm one person. And the more things that I have out there from a virtual space, because people may not be able to afford to get me face to face. They may not be able to afford to get the coaching sessions, but they may be able to afford to buy the online module that can teach them everything we've been mentioning about emotional intelligence just on self-management, because they want to work on their self-talk. So they'll be able to go into the self-talk module and be able to figure out what that looks like. So that's where I think the progress is really coming from me. And that's a major initiative that I have going on right now. The second portion is I know there is a population of people who are in desperate need of assistance, and those who have served their country and are going by the wayside. And so the book title, Elevation Requires Change, now has a separate arm with PLI called Operation Elevation. We've just formed our nonprofit. And this nonprofit has been designed because I want to be able to provide services for veterans, young and old. I don't care if you did 4 years or if you did 50 years. I want to be able to talk to you about resilience. I want to be able to teach you about emotional intelligence so that you can show up and be the best version of yourself for you and for your families. A lot of them have been lost. A lot of them have been neglected. And there are a lot of good programs out there that take them on hunts. There are a lot of good programs out there that take them on fishing trips. But what does that really do for the mind? What does doing 22 push-ups do for somebody who is really suffering? I love the causes, but if I do 22 push-ups right now, how many people did I save? I'm not knocking what it is, but what I'm saying, because it brings phenomenal awareness to the organization. But I want to be able to give the skill that can save their lives. And that skill is something that can say, Dimyas said self-awareness is me being able to recognize my emotions as they occur. And then he told me that being able to spot my emotions, that my emotions would manifest in me physiologically in the form of a higher heart rate, in the form of me having an adrenaline rush, hormonal, in the form of me having higher breathing pattern or neuromuscular. And right now I feel myself tensing up. So that's neuromuscular. And then he said, that's my body's alarm telling me that there's something I need to pay attention to. And then he told me that I need to monitor my self-talk. So right now I'm really frustrated driving on this road because I got laid off from work and this dude is behind me blowing his horn and I really want to have him pull over. But you know what? I care so much about my family. And if I do this, it's going to change my life and it's going to change their life forever. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use this self-management strategy and I'm going to buy myself some time. I'm going to pull over and let them pass and I'm going to count to 50. And if I'm really upset, I'm going to count to 100. And at that point, he would have passed, that moment would have passed, and I will be able to go on with my day. That's the stuff that I want to be able to help people with. And that's the next arm of Perdue Leadership Institute with Operation Elevation.
And so I just really now want to know the conception of elevation requires change, right? So I know you built this book, and then I really encourage anybody listening to go back, get the book. It's the book right behind me. Excellent book, written, so thoughtful. And it has a lot of these principles tied into what you teach in PLIs. How did you come up with some of the things that you written in the book outside of being locked in a cabin for a week and a couple of days? But how did you come up with this is how I want to deliver who I am to people, or deliver change to people?
That book was written to me.
Bars.
That book was written to me. And if there's anybody in the world who's ever felt like I felt, that book will resonate with them.
Oh, yeah. especially the U-turn. That's because that's my wife, the U-turn.
You know what I mean? It's just, that's what it was, you know? So first and foremost, I'm my first client.
Mm,
I am my first client. Before I coached anybody else, I had to coach me and get me right. And how could I go to somebody else completely broken? So when I went to that cabin, when I wrote the section on identify, when you identify your distractions, you identify the root cause of your inaction. I was talking about me. The reason why you didn't write the book for 5 years is because you never sat down and identified your distractions that were the root cause of your inaction. But when you identified your distractions, positive, your beautiful family, you want to be around them every day, you're willing to give them all the time they need and deserve. When you think about the people who will call you, hey, coach, you got a second? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Saying yes to so many things. Well, guess what? I realized, and I created an acronym, YES. You keep saying yes to everybody, your elevation stops. And I need to realize I needed to start saying no and open myself up to new opportunities. When I stopped saying yes and start saying no, the book got complete. So I had to coach myself first. So everything in there, when I'm talking about conquering comfort and complacency, Dimyas was dealing with that. When Dimyas was dealing with ego and emotion, that letter that says a letter to fear, a letter from doubt, a letter that changed everything, that's why it was written to me.
a letter to greatness.
A letter to greatness. Like all of these letters in that book started with me. All of these started with me. And so the concept, the reason why it was so easy to do it in 10 days is because I would be driving in my truck and I would be dealing with something and I would turn on the voice memo and I would simply say, Dear Dimyas, the thing that's within you has to come out. It has to come out because if it doesn't come out, there's a world of people who will never be able to hear your message. And this is just me freestyling right now but that's what it was like for me. And I would talk to myself and when I got to that cabin, I would press play and I would turn on some classical music or I would turn on something and I would just write. Or here's the other thing. I'm being transparent. I would go to Microsoft Dictate and I would start talking and I would just start talking. Here's my section title. This section title is called Get to the Water. And that's where I start talking about the process of what the sea turtles do when they're met with adversity. Immediately, the sea turtles have to crawl out of the ground. They got to get to the top. And for some reason, they're not compelled to go to the opposite direction. They're compelled to go directly to the water, never being told. Nobody said, hey, we got to go to the water. Nobody said that. But I knew the journey of the sea turtle. So my life was the same thing as a sea turtle. And I knew I needed to teach people about it because growing up in Montgomery, Alabama, I felt like I had to crawl my way out of the mud. And there was a world of people who feel like they have to do the same thing. So in the same way I was born and had to crawl to my surface, that sea turtle needed to get to the water where success is. And I needed to get to the water. That was called the Marine Corps. I needed to go somewhere to go and do it. But here's the great thing that came out of that. We talk about how the book came because the second portion said, get lost. The sea turtles are known for going to what's called the Sargasso Sea, and they disappear for up to 10 years, right? I disappeared for 22. Because when those sea turtles are gone for those 10 years, they're feeding, they're growing, and they're developing, and they only return back to the place where they were when it's time to reproduce. I did my time, my 22 years, and I went to that cabin. That was my shoreline where I went back to reproduce. And the birthing process for me was the form of that book. So all of my notes, all of the stories I had in here, I knew when I sat down to do it, coach yourself, write this book to you first, and you will never lose. And the fruits of that, the feedback that I get from it says, I feel like you're talking to me. And that's what I wanted.
Yeah, it's so intimate. And then when you say, I wrote this to me, for me, it gives me a different perspective of the delivery of it because I thought you wrote it for me. That was amazing. Right. It's amazing. So tell me, man, how can people get a hold of your digital product? And then how can they get a hold of you, Perdue Leadership Institute?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate that. So the best way to get in contact with me, formally is going to www.perdueleadership.com. That's PERDUE like the chicken and not PUR like the university. I got none of their money, but that's loading, right? But go to PerdueLeadership.com and there's a contact form in there. You can just go and drop your information. Site's being updated routinely, regularly right now, but it goes straight to my inbox, or you can send me an email directly at dcperdue, PERDUE at PerdueLeadership.com. Now, if you just want some good old content, go and check out my stuff on _Dimyas_Perdue. on IG. And at the end of the day, man, those are the best ways to be able to get in contact with me. And if you want the book product, the best place to get the book product, obviously, is Amazon. You got the 2-day on the Prime right there. That is a good thing with Amazon Prime, but Amazon is typically out of stock with my book. So the other best place for you to be able to get that, and the best place for me as the author, would be bookbaby.com, and just type in "Elevation Requires Change," and you'll see this mug on the cover. You click buy, and that'll be it. You know what I mean? But if you go to the website and you would like an autographed one, a personalized message, go to the website, send me a message. I got plenty here at the house, and I would love to show up and bless somebody with it.
That's amazing. I want to open up the floor and just kind of give you an opportunity to say some last words for the listener.
My screensaver on my phone, before I even say that, so thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to do this, because I know who you are. I know what you do. I know how you operate. Since our relationship started, I started to, outside of my social media cleanse that I'm on right now, I was able to see you in action and hear some of the things you're talking about. So I'm honored to be that person that you said, you know what, I want to bring Dimyas here to be able to speak to my audience. I value that. So before I go and send any message to them, I thank you for this opportunity, because this is bigger than both of us. This is bigger than both of us. Now, one of the messages I would give people, this has been my screensaver on my phone for the last few years. And the reason why I have an hourglass on my phone is because there is a reminder I want to have for myself, that I want to live my life like there's more sand on the bottom than there is on the top. Because if you live your life like there's more sand on the bottom, you will make better decisions about who's in that circle. You would think more than once about who you choose to call and who you choose to spend that quality time with. As I said in that letter that changed everything, right? You start to think twice about your goals and what really matters to you and what purpose and fulfillment really look like. And being that I live with the thought process that there's more sand on the bottom of my hourglass, I'm willing to put more out there for people, because I realize I want to live an infinite life. Simon Sinek says that there's a finite life and there's the infinite life. The finite life is the life where people wake up every day, they kiss their loved ones, they go off to work, they do their jobs, they come home, they eat dinner, they go to bed, and they rinse and repeat that every day until they retire and until they die. That's a finite life. They went in and they did exactly what they're supposed to do. It's not what I want. That's not what I was created for. And that's not what you, listener, you, viewer, this is not what you were created for. You were created to live an infinite life. You were created to be the person that wakes up every day, loves on their loved ones as if their hourglass is almost up. And then when they leave the door, they go to work and they pour out their lives on other people. They pass off the skills. They pass off their talents. They have quality and meaningful conversations. They go to work and they're not just human doings, just always doing something. You become a human being again, and you look at the person in the eye when you talk to them, and you treat them like they're somebody of value and not just a coworker, somebody in passing. Because that same person who you don't give the time of day could be that person passing you when you're on the way home, when you need somebody to help you change your tire. Right. And then you go home and then you love on your family again. And then you rinse and repeat that. You pass knowledge on to your kids, your brides, your husbands, your aunts, your uncles. And the more you pour out and the more you pass on to yourself, the more poems you write, the more songs you write, the more books you write, the more videos you take of your loved ones, the more pictures that you take to be able to preserve it. That's what makes you infinite. That's what allows you to be able to live forever. And so I'm encouraging everybody, live life. There is a few more grains of sand at the top of your hourglass. That's the first thing. The second thing is to treat people like human beings and don't just be a human doing. And the last thing that I would give is every night before I go to bed, I plug this thing up. And every day I wake up, it's at 100%. It's at 100%. And I go to work, I do my thing, I travel, I'm talking on the phone. Sometimes I scroll, I go on the internet, I take a look at something. But here's what starts to change. When my phone is at 50%, I'll still answer if anybody calls. When my phone's at 20% and 10%, oh, it begins to change. I start to become careful about who I give that energy to in that phone. I switch and I put it on power save mode. I go into power save and then I start closing out apps because I want to make sure the last bit of this battery can last the exact same amount of time. And so here's what I'm telling everybody else. When you close your eyes at night and you wake up the next day, you wake up with 100%. But who are you allowing to drain your battery? Who are you allowing? How many apps that are open that are draining? The more apps you have open, that drains it. How many apps do you have open or bad relationships that you need to close out and get rid of? The minute you start to realize that you need to treat yourself in the same way that cell phone, power up in the day and protect your energy, protect your mental space, close out everything that's draining you, make that circle even smaller, and treat everything like the hourglass. There's a few sands of glass up top and we're at 10%. I need you to go on power mode, get lost, get to the water, take care of yourself. And I promise you, when you do that, you'll be more effective. That's my message for everybody.
Crazy. This is wild, my man. This is wild.
I appreciate you, man.
Again, all the time, even every time we talk, man, it's always my pleasure. I truly appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing with our listeners. And on this show, we say, change your mind, change your money, change your life. We truly appreciate you for doing that for our listeners.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me, man. I look forward to the next one. I know there'll be another one.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. We are over and out.
Thank you for joining the podcast. And remember, change your mind, change your money, change your life. We out.